Hey everybody, it's Dave here. I'm back again with another Working Out Loud. Welcome, it's Friday. We made it. We also made it at the end of the month.
Yay.
All right. Yeah, it's great. So today, this is unscripted. This is, well, partially scripted. Today, what we decided to do is just jump on and while we're puttering about here, what we're going to do is share and open the link up to anybody who wants to talk. This is kind of like an open working office hours, wouldn't you say, Brian?
Yeah. I think of it. I think the topic we've come up with here is once we get into it, everybody's going to be familiar with this one.
I think so. Yeah, what we're wanting to do. So I'm going to give share another link here out. We're going to get going slow today. All right, Brian, why don't you set this one up and tell the audience what we're here to talk about today, and like let's provide some context first. You go, and then I'll go, and then we'll pull up our script and let's tear into this.
Yeah. So something that came up recently in a community discussion from the customer ed community was around like, in essence, like title inflation, or I'd call it like it's an aspect of title inflation in software businesses primarily. So there's a lot of companies that are out there, a lot of roles that are being opened where it's like a director role. So it's like a director of education, director of learning, director of, customer education, whatever. And then you go and take an interview for one of these jobs. Many of us have had this experience. And it's actually like there's no direct reports, there's no budget, and it feels a little bit like
no plan.
There's no plan. It feels like there's a little bit of a bait and switch, and so you go in and some people have been interviewing for these roles that are like director of something, and it doesn't really feel like a director role. And so this was kind of like a topic that's really come up a few times, and we just wanted to raise this as being like, hey, what's going on with this? And kind of have a conversation about some of the different things that could be driving it, some of the different ways to handle it, and just kind of riff on this title inflation that's going on in the customer education space. How do we feel about it? What might be some of the implications?
All right, I like this topic, and to be frank, let me set it up from my end too. Because of where I work now, I get to talk with a lot of different people, and because of what we've done with C-Lab, what you've done with learning outcomes, and that's kind of the spirit we're talking about right now. We're talking about this networking community of, well, heck, friends and people that are peers, people that are giving us a lot of information and feedback every day about the jobs we do. One thing I was thinking of, Brian, when you were starting to talk and set this up is, I did it in a workshop I did just yesterday. There's a word, FOMO, that keeps popping into my head. Now, again, job titles. You have put out some pretty interesting material on learning outcomes, I think, about hiring strategies. I talked about this a while back and used some of my predecessors' work, Bill Kashard. Hiring is difficult, but what we're seeing today is a lot of, oh, hey, here's this title, and I'm going to go, and I'm excited about a title. I want to get a title, and that's drawing me along in my career. But then, like you said, it's almost a bait and switch sometimes for some folks, where you get in and you go, now I'm an IC. So okay, let's get into this as well. Like, isn't this a little bit of where do we want to start on this topic, Brian?
So I think one of the interesting things to think about, right, is to ask ourselves, why is this happening, right? So why is it that companies are using the director title? I think if we start there and then kind of ask ourselves, well, how do we respond to it as practitioners? It's maybe that's kind of like a logical way to approach it. And I actually dug in a little bit prior to this, because I was like, so as Dave mentions, it's like I feel like I've spent a lot of time over the course of the last maybe year and a half thinking about organization structures around customer education, how learning programs, build and scale over time, what types of roles are added. I put out that maturity model, which was like in part trying to understand these different team structures. And sure enough, when I was interviewing for some of these roles, you see this director thing happening. And so
Yeah.
the thing that I think about, and like, so I've dug into it a little bit and asked, like, all right, well, what's going on here? Like, how come I'm looking at director role? How come I'm applying to director roles? And when I talk to the CEO or I talk to senior leaders at these companies and start asking them about like what kinds of plans that they have in place for it, they don't really have a plan. They don't really have the idea. Now, one of the things that they'll typically say is they'll say, well, we expect this role to design the program, and then we'll come back and talk about what kinds of resourcing is available, which I think feels as a person when you're not yet in the role, it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to commit to taking the role if I don't have like a clear, you're like, it's like, show me the money first. Like, show me that you have some budget.
The money.
It's like, show me that you have some money that you're going to apply to this solution prior to me actually taking it, because I don't want to end up going through the process of, quitting a job and going to another job.
Wait.
Yeah.
Can I share an experience that
sure,
I've
had?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all probably had similar.
I've had okay, so I want to share the felt experience of this as gosh, I've been in my career for a number of years. I've done a whole lot of stuff. I see a job title, and let's just go with this. There's many different job titles in this category, but director means something to me, right? I see that title and I go, oh my gosh, the director of customer education.
So what is director? Actually, that's a good question. What does that mean? Maybe that's a better place to even start than like, why is it happening? Which is like, because that's fundamentally what we're talking about. So what is director, Dave, when you're like, I see a director title, what does that mean to you? What do you think?
Oh gosh. Okay.
What do you think director means? That, like, this is the expectation of the, consumer, I guess,
get a badge
of the role. Yeah. So like, what is you as a consumer of this role where you're going to go apply to it? Like, what is that? What do you think it means?
The outright, I feel like it means that I have at least a regular audience and involvement in executive function, right? Yep. That my voice will be heard. It's not about, I mean, one of the things in my career I've always looked at is you're working through a series of titles, and titles should mean something, right? And when I see director, I go, hey, I've kind of made it now, because I'm in a role where it's authoritative. I should have a team of people, because what I want to do is come in and say, okay, what resources do I have available to me? What cards do I have on the table? I wouldn't be able to know that I have something to play with. It's like, okay, I'm a soccer coach for my kids, right? I have resources. I have people. I know that's assumed, right? And what I come into is that title comes with a field of play where I can do things and do my work. Okay, so that's what I think.
Yeah, and I think that those things. Now you're probably, so you're saying you're the director of a soccer team of children. So that's good.
No, I'm a coach, but it's still the same kind of concept. You have an accountability to a field of play.
You're right. So when you actually go and like look this up, there's actually a fair number of articles that are about this, and about this concept of like what a director means. And I will note that when you go Google this and you say like, what does a director mean? It seems like there are two different versions of the answer. One, which is very much related to the UK, and one that is, say, called like rest of world. The UK apparently has some like clear rules and structures around what a director means. I don't know. I haven't had a job in the UK, so I don't know this. But like, so I'll just throw that out there. That it's like director means something different. So when you're reading the articles, just realize that there are some like legal ramifications or frameworks.
Yeah.
So one of the things though that comes up when it's like, what does a director mean in a traditional sense, are things like you have an area of authority and accountability. You're part of strategic decision making, and in some cases, like in the old days, which I don't know what the old days are anymore, the old days would be like, that would actually be someone who would be considered like just what we might think of as just below, or like a VP position, which is like a director is just below the board, and you're basically like, you're in charge of a certain area. So you'd call this maybe like your field of play. It's like, that is the expectation I think that many of us hold around directors or a director title. And so when we're going and looking at these, it therefore is a little bit kind of like incongruent when you go in and say, okay, cool. So tell me about the team. Are there incumbents? what's the budget, what's the plan, and none of that exists, because you'd say, well, then I have authority over nothing. I don't, if there's not a plan, then I have accountability over nothing. And if there's no sort of like expectation when you think of who you roll up to, because I've seen a lot of these roles often will roll up into like a VP of operations, a VP of customer success. When you start asking those people in interviews, you'd say, well, so then what strategic decisions or what, influence am I supposed to be responsible for? And it's like, we'll figure it out over time. All of those things are like, because if you bring the expectation, like what Dave, you just mentioned, if you bring that expectation where you say like, I'm going to have this strategic role, and they're sort of like, we'll figure it out. You're like, well, then that doesn't seem very, it doesn't seem like
figure it out.
Yeah. Or it's like, we don't like, that doesn't sound like you have like a bolt that you need tightened somewhere. It's just kind of like, we'll just figure it out. You're like, well, isn't something loose that needs to be tightened? Like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the measurement of success?
Well, wait, can I go back to that? Because the let's figure it out thing bothers me a lot. And this is, and again, I really like this topic, and I'm glad you came up with it, because we've been hearing
I came up with it. Thank Jasonda. She came up with it.
Jasonda,
customer education.
Hello,
Jasonda.
So. I hope you're doing great out there. Yeah, no, it's not her either. I've talked to several other peers, even just this week, about, hey, I got this role. And I mean, it even starts before the role. You started off coming in. One of the trends that I see throughout our field, and again, our field is, if we reframe it, customer education is this function, this practice or discipline that applies to building the knowledge, the practical working knowledge of how to do a role, right? It's how do I use this widget or this app or whatever at a high level of quality. And this is a specific niche. And we do want people who are senior to come in and be able to express their experience sets. Many people come into this field, Brian, like you and I have different basis, but we agree, like our whole field does, on a core tenet of rules. We need to move fast. Sometimes, we have to worry, tune quality to meet the needs of go-to-market. We need to try to deliver content on the day that content changes are released. We've got all these things that we have to think about and do that are really hard. So people necessarily that are coming into a senior role have a broad spectrum of capabilities, and likely they do or should have as one of those tremendous ability for soft skills and substantial management experience and expertise. Right.
So yeah, I would chalk those up to other aspects of so those would be like if earlier what you described, where you're like, you want to have executive decision making, there's authority and accountability, those would be like the responsibilities of the role. And so then to successfully apply somebody to those challenges, you would then want to have somebody with those qualities, where you'd be like, okay, so if we want to have somebody who has authority and accountability, well, they're clearly going to need to be like a people manager. They're clearly going to need to have soft skills. If we want somebody who has strategic decision making, then they better know the role. They better know like how the pieces of the engine function to make value come out of it. So it's like there's these two sides of the coin that I think that you're illustrating from your perspective, which is when we think director, it is both, it's a handshake between the company or the organization that's hiring and the person who's like applying and being put into that position, which is the skills on one side and the problem set on the other. And it sort of seems like a lot of these director type roles and even VP type roles are like, maybe they don't like one side of it. Either the person's not like ready to handle those kinds of things, or which, who knows, or like the company's not defining it very well. And I would interpret some of like what came up in the conversation that Jasonda was bringing up was that it's like, I think there are many folks within the practitioner space that do have all those skills, that are like good people managers, that have a sense of how to run and tune the engine, that know some of those best practices, and are like, therefore I am looking for a director position, and I see director position, and I walk through that door and start talking to the company that's hiring for it. You're like, you don't seem like, this company doesn't seem like they're actually doesn't know how to use this tool that they're trying to acquire. So I don't know, trying to put those pieces together there.
No, I really like what you're saying here.
Analogies all over the place. I'm like, are we tuning an engine?
No. Well, let's bring it back. So there are a few things that I know that are happening, Brian. Number one, there's a palpable sense of FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
What I see, and I saw this really happen in about a year ago, maybe it started, and then now it started to become even more pronounced. So the thing that I see is there's a posting made somewhere, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, whatever, and that post is, we're looking for a dynamic director of customer success that can build a team and blah, blah, blah. Cool. That's exciting. That's what many of us in this field want. We want, what are we lured by, Brian? I'm lured by authority, autonomy, having a field of players that I can bring to the table to solve educational problems, right? But the other thing that happens is there's vagueness. I see a job posting that says blah, blah, blah. Now I go in and I interview. And in that interview, what has 99 times out of 100 happened? I've not done that many times. Let's say 9 out of 10. Okay,
success rate than I do.
Yeah. Okay, Dave. You know what? So we want you to lay out your program and all the things that you're going to build, because I'll come and say, hey, what's the problem to solve? Where are we at? I'll do the maturity model thing. Where are we? I make a lot of questions. Brutally unfair, I will say, to expect someone to spend a week of their time to extrude a whole working operational plan and literally hand that off to you. And I'm talking to a leader or an executive right now who's, if you're out there hiring, please don't do this. So I'm spending all this time planning, developing, thinking how many resources, thinking about your problem. This is probably a 20, 40-hour job. And then I give you that plan, Brian. And then you go, oh, thank you very much. Next candidate. Oh, I'm interviewing for a very, very senior position now. And you have my plan. And I don't have a job.
Right. That happens a lot.
Yeah. You're not looking at me. You're looking at the plan that I could generate. If you want to do that, I'm a consultant. I have a product offering that can do that and save you the trouble, right? That's I'm not going to say, well, I am going to seg into that. If at Service Rocket, that's what we do. We are here to we are here to advise, coach, develop, design, and do the work. But this work is a known quantity now, right, Brian? It is the field of customer education is a known thing. You can go read Adam's book, Daniel's book, Donna's book. There's a number of books out there that tell us how to do customer education. People have read those books. The executive or leaders are out there in the field that can do this work, have done this work. Let's not damage the title.
Yeah. I kind of want to weigh in on one aspect that you're talking about here, which is like developing the plan during an interview process. I think that there's a big difference between making that requisite for the interview process, where it feels like, where regardless of the role, it doesn't matter whether you're like building bathtubs or battleships. It's like if you're asking somebody to do that kind of work, then and somebody even mentions here where it's like it's kind of unethical to ask for that. That's not an evaluation. That's more of like, do work for me. When I interview for these kinds of jobs, or when I have interviewed for these kinds of jobs, I just kind of take it upon myself to feel like I want to give them, like, even if I don't take the job, I still, I've built frameworks using the maturity model. You can see those on Learning Outcomes. It's like I've built these frameworks. I can apply those frameworks. It's like I will still leave behind something and be like, hey, for whoever takes this role, here's a little like place to think about, because it's sort of like, why am I making somebody else go through the whole process of doing it? And I like to think through the interview process in that way, where I'm like, if I were to take this job, what would be the strategy? So I think we naturally go through that. If they make you do it, that's kind of scummy, but for what it's worth, I tend to do that with like jobs that I interview with anyway, because it's like, if I take the job, I want to show them that we have some agreement before I start, that I'm like, this is what we're going to do together. So I would want to say that. The other thing is, like, also there's a comment in here that somebody says, I'm totally fine with building a team from scratch, but often there's no budget or headcount committed, just vague promises. And that, I think, is the thing that I'm really trying to narrow in on, is asking this question of like, how and why does that experience happen? Right. So it's like, why is it that wait, how, what can you reframe that?
the experience of what you hire somebody as
where
a leader.
a rec is generated for a director or very senior role when there is no plan behind it, right? So like when there's no plan, there's no budget, there's no commitment on the side of the company. Why is that taking place? And again, I have some opinions or some belief around what I think is going on, but like to me, that's the underlying question that's here. Is like what's going on with these titles, and how do we as a community sort of, I don't want to say capitalize. I feel like that's kind of a scummy word for it, but like, how do we?
You scummy twice now. All right.
I know.
That's two.
I feel scummy. I am scummy. No, yeah, we keep doing it. Keep using scummy. Scummy's the word today. Scuzzy, maybe scuzzy. So like, how do we help like articulate this and hold the value that? How do we like go into these conversations and have make sure that we maintain our value throughout it, our values, and also maintain the value that we bring, and have a more like, if you call me a director, I'm gonna show up like a director.
Yeah, well, yeah, you show up for the job, and you know what? I think you had you shared something with me. Do you have that handy, that document? About I want actually like I don't want to belabor this. The point that we're trying to make here by working literally out loud is we wanted to elevate this happening, right? Again, we're seeing what we call title, not tire. I looked at that sideways. With tire inflation? Okay, I've got a pump.
We have a tire inflation problem.
Yeah. No, it's we are seeing title inflation. I think it is a lure. It is something that it happens in SaaS in particular, software in startups. In startups, it's not uncommon, and this is a practice we do need to stop. That we end up getting a title to someone that may be deserving of that, but not skilled for it, and that hurts because well, now you're putting people in a role and putting a lot on them, and if they can't perform, and they don't have the resources, and they don't understand what they need to be doing, that's going to hurt our company. That's going to hurt the industry. So where is that? Do you have that document up?
I don't have any of the links up, but there's a couple things. So I found a couple of resources I thought were really interesting. One is there's a couple of like, call them, leadership leveling things. So if you just look at like the search term that I used was when is a director not a director, or what is a director in business?
Okay.
And so one of the things, I'll just kind of like read some of the things off here for the sake of it. So here is a definition of directors. And I would say that this probably applies to what we talked about previously, right? Which is provide leadership and direction at the top of an organization, determine the future of the company and protect assets and reputation, and are responsible for long-term prosperity of the company, which I just call like strategic. Let's see. Ultimately responsible to shareholders of the company. So same kind of thing, like a strategic relationship. And then have some kind of specific rights. This, again, I think was written for the UK, so the wording is a little bit different. But basically, it's like you have an area of accountability and responsibility that's strategic, that is supposed to drive forward the value of the business. Compare that to a manager, which is carry forward strategy on behalf of the directors, are generally appointed or removed by the directors, have no legal requirement to be held to account, and not legally responsible under statutory provision. So
that's a manager.
Definition of that's a manager. The definition of directors is very like strategic and accountable, right, to the long-term prosperity. And I think for many of us, we're also, when we go to these director interviews or above, we're like, yes, I'm thinking you want me for a strategic role. And we go into the interview and you're kind of like, you're not treating me like a very strategic kind of asset. So I found another article. For what it's worth. Also, I have my like dog assistant here, who's going to probably start barking any second.
Hey, Argus.
Who's not a director. No statutory responsibility for this dog. So there's this other article, which was on HR Dive. It's like an HR website. And it was about a title inflation on the rise. One recruiter says, here's how to prevent blah, blah, blah. So here they're talking about, since about 2018 into 2020, and certainly in like the COVID times, is that there's been this trend in software where smaller software businesses don't have the means to provide the incentives that we would want to have as employees. And so what's happened is that slowly one of the incentives that they're doing, knowing that things like a director is sort of like this gateway into higher roles, and that includes like higher expectations of higher salaries, et cetera, things where you're like, I want to make 150 plus, I want to make 180 plus.
Right.
They know that director matters to you. And so they use director and they use VP titles as a way, as an incentive to know that it's like, look, I can't pay you more money, but I can give you that director title that you're probably not going to get at your current company if you come over to us. And so it's literally, they're not setting an expectation, if I interpret this article correctly, they're not setting an expectation that you're going to operate as a director. They're giving you a title as if it's like a badge. Like now you get the badge and you don't need to go through, you don't need to climb all those ladders to get to it, which I think is really interesting, because if you're giving me this badge as a director, right, to incentivize me to come to your company, doesn't that mean that I would just take the badge, work there for 6 months, and then bounce and go someplace else and transact with that like currency that you've given me? So to me, it seems like it's kind of a short-sighted thing.
Well, doesn't that happen though? And that's in startup life. I see this all the time, and it's almost, I don't even know how to put it, viral, where, you know, I'll go somewhere and here I am, I've got a good solid 25, 30 years of experience in IT, tech, science. I've been a manager, I've been all these things. And then I come in and this is the felt experience. Okay. And this is not to be meant as derogatory or targeted towards anybody. Then I have a peer next to me, or even higher up by several levels, that am like, well, not like, I'm just a manager and now I have no influence. And then they're a director, but they don't have anybody and they can't do it. It's just, it's Wild West. There's no consistency.
Yeah. They, like the consistency of it. I think the consistency is maybe the thing that we're kind of like talking about here, where it's like, and I think this is maybe, you know, I know Jasant is on in the comments and things like that. I think that's kind of what one of the things we're really struggling with as a practice is. It's like the consistency, the expectations broadly beyond just the titles, right? But like the consistency of saying like, does everybody understand what this is? Does everybody understand what a team or an organization structure looks like for this? You know, how might, you know, are we applying that correctly? Is there a way that we can get the word out about it? Is this broad thing that we're dealing with? And the titles is this sort of like, I would say the title thing that we're experiencing, the title inflation and the misalignment, where even, you know, I can't quite see within the way that it shows up on my screen here, but like someone says, you know, can you talk about people asking to see my design portfolio for a director role? It's weird. In my last role, I didn't do any content development because I had 8 people doing that. Exactly. Right. Where you're like, why, what do you mean? Like, well, are you gonna talk about soft skills, talk about leadership skills and strategy, not like, let's see.
Really, somebody has said that.
Like, pictures, you know, like
I'd love to see this. Like my design portfolio, Brian, is this. Okay, for me to say I'm a director, which I am now, and I actually feel it and I see it and it means something on paper. I have people working with me. I have an expectation, even by those people. Dave, don't do, because I'm like you, probably hands-on. And many of us in a practitioner role in the customer ed space are more hands-on, probably because we've worked at these companies where we've had to, right? That's not the goal. And for my design portfolio, look at the last 3 companies I led teams at and go to their academies. Go look at their the pages for all of the training. My teams and I built those together. So the legacy of the experience is, okay, now I can say it. I was at Gainsight and we worked to build the academy and the program there and all these things. And now that's continued to be evolved by Lila and team. Then I worked at Azuqua and that company got acquired and all of that got rolled into Okta and is still being used. And then worked at Outreach and build a program with our team there. And it was wonderful. You could still see that. So for me, if it's, oh, Dave, can you show me how you built a piece of content or something? I'm not going to want to do that. I'm not there to do that job. Right. I'm there to lead a team and build the team. And then when I get into that role, my expectations now let's talk about different roles. This applies equally up and down, right? A manager. What does a manager mean? A manager means I will necessarily have, or in short sequence, have a team of people, or even one or two. And I'm accountable not for doing the work, but helping make sure to oversee the work gets done, right? A director is more strategic. Like a senior manager would be in between that. We need to see that. What I'm trying to get to is we need to see a progression of titles, and we need to see that those titles actually map to the roles that the people are performing. And if they're not, that damages our industry because it sets the wrong expectation, and it actually sets up a lot of anxiety and frustration on the people, because when I can't, so if I'm at this level and I can't do the things that I know, I don't have the social capital or influence to do the things that need to get done, I'm not going to want to stay. Right? That's kind of what I'm saying, is that we need the titles to mean something, and we need the authority that comes with that title to actually be implemented so that we can work.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Sharing the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like so I just put in the comments here, the team structure org guy, which isn't hard and fast. And certainly it's so like a learning outcomes resource, but certainly not a, applies to all types of learning businesses. But, but I think with SaaS, it kind of holds up. Yeah, I think that like, I think one of the interesting things about this, right, regardless of what the titles are, I think one of the expectations we have, to go back to what you were saying previously, where it's like your like expectation when you're applying to a role is that you're going to have some kind of like strategic, input into it, is when we go into these roles, and I'd love to see whether or not this shows up within the comments with people, but it's like when we go to these roles and we apply for director roles, do we feel like the companies have a goal in mind, right? It's the first thing.
What?
Well, no, but I mean, for real, I think some companies do. I don't want to be diminutive. I think some companies and some teams really do. But it's like, I think that's one of those, what's the first question to ask when it comes to any of this behavior change kind of activity? Is like, well, what are we trying to change? What is it you're trying to do? Are you trying to increase revenue? Are you trying to, drive efficiency within your onboarding or success solutions? Are you trying to like raise brand awareness? Like, what's the objective?
Okay, wait.
Trying to do?
So can I use this as a seg?
Yeah, seg away. By the way, I'm going to seg away for just 1 second and take these two dogs that are like rolling.
Okay, well,
get them out of the room. So I'll be.
That's fine. I'll go solo view.
Whatever. Yeah, there you go.
There, I'll go solo view, and then while you're doing that, I'll pretend you're there talking while you're taking your dogs out, and nobody can see you. But one of the things that now Brian's talking about all of this, and we see this at Service Rocket, right? The conversation that I'd like to have with many of you, and we're doing this pretty frequently. Let me share my screen here. We have a program. Oh, we can't do it that way. I don't know what's going on. Okay, never mind. Share screen.
Oh, I like
that window.
I like that comment that just came in, by the way. I always ask about the goal and impetus for hiring for the role. I would say about half of them have a goal, and half of those goals are well defined. That's interesting. It's like, boom, there you go, right? Like that's an interesting aspect of it. Is like, yeah, do you have a goal? Is it well defined? Do you even really know what questions you're trying to ask? Sorry.
No, sorry at all. What we're really trying to do, Brian, is help, right? What we're trying to do with this discussion today is frame up the inherent problem that we have, that I think is, okay, most of the time you have a hiring manager, and this has come from an executive, right? I want to talk to the customer education function that you're building. So I'm going to talk to you as an executive or a leader. You want to build this program. You have a fear of missing out, and you should, because this is hard to do. You need to find that one purple squirrel, right? That person that has a series and has enough cognizance of the industry, experiences with people, and the craft itself, the craft of training live and on demand, and it's going to fit into your organization pretty well. That's a lot to ask of somebody. So that person necessarily is going to be a leader. One of the things that I don't think is happening, Brian, is that moment when we think we need that person. okay, do we really have a plan in mind? We have to have a plan in mind. Do you go and say, I'm going to build a customer success ops function, or I'm going to go build a sales team, or without any plan at all? How do you make that plan? I'm going to say that's hard. I've built, this is my 4th team building for just customer education, not, I can get that. It's more than that for beyond it. So what I want to do is promote this page here. Let me add it in the comments. This is a program. This is Service Rocket's program for customer education that I lead, customer education as a service. One of the things that I'm really intrigued by and want to do, and I'm going to spin down on this page to show, this is a journey that Brian, you and I have been on this journey. What happens? We need to come in and actually do a lot of discovery. You and I, right? We'll come in and figure stuff out. Then we need to make a plan. Now, if you're as a leader hiring somebody and wanting them to come, wholesale with a plan for you, that's a high expectation. That plan takes me months, years sometimes to articulate, right? And then now I'm this director and my team, I've done this last 2 weeks. I did 2 workshops, one private, one public. I'm like a coach. Well, I'm a coach for soccer, but I'm like a coach for education. When I go into those workshops, what do I hear? We don't know what to do next. And we did this and it didn't work. And I want to do this. And we're not getting support to do that. And I'm there to say, okay, I feel you. Oh gosh, I understand that pain. I empathize with you. You've done that. Try this, do that. Your peers as leaders, your peers as practitioners, we have a good network out there. But the program that I built will help channel that and get you into some solutions. Really, what I wanted to talk about is this. When I come in, Brian, and I want to do an analysis, and I'm at the same time pitching something, but I'm talking to you all the areas that I think about. If I were to architect a program for you, leader out there who wants to build this program, this is the plan. Let's look at this premium type package. I'm going to do discovery. I'm going to talk to everybody in your org. This takes a while. I'll meet people, talk to people, understand their problems, turn over rocks, do all that kind of stuff. And then we know where we're going, right? Now that if you did this part alone as a leader without hiring somebody, you have that plan. You can do this on your own. You could hire someone like me or others. Brian, you've done this kind of stuff in the past too. Mm-hmm. But then you go deeper. Now I'm going to stop there. This is in the comments if you want to see it. But what I really just wanted to show is, did a solo view there. What I really wanted to show is that we've been thinking about this a lot as practitioners in the industry. If you want to get the most out of a leader, hire a leader that is imbued with a title that matters and has the authority and gravitas behind it. Give them the support and the budget. Show them the budget. There are times I've rolled into jobs where I've not even been aware of what that is. Mm. This is a real role. This is not something you're going to babysit or be scared of. This is a director, a senior manager, a manager, a VP. These are all really impactful functions for your org. Don't screw it up.
I think so first off, I love the framework. I love the Service Rocket framework. I love the detail that you really put into that structure. Both of us have done these kinds of advisory, or you're doing the advisory work now. I've done the advisory work in the past and I'm doing it again now. And it does start with that assessment phase, a whole of organization kind of view into it. I think maybe one of the critical things that those of us, and this is for maybe the people that have yet to have this experience, but one of the critical things to ask that should be a red flag when you go into talking about director and VP roles is to ask this fundamental question about whether or not they have any kind of budget. Do you have a budget? Do you have a plan? And I think to Jasanda's point that she made in comment was, and I think it was Jasanda, it might've been Sharon, but does that goal that's being defined make sense? And I think then there's this question of recognize that if they don't really have a goal, or the goal doesn't seem to be something it's a well-defined goal, that is a significant consideration that you have to take when you're actually going to be joining that team, which is okay, part of my job for the first 6 months, maybe even a year, I would say probably 6 months,
Yeah, easy.
The first 6 months is going to be about building that plan. And so if you are talking to the person, here's like a a suggestion, and I think we all know this. It's like if you're talking to that person or you're talking to the hiring manager and they don't have a good goal or they don't have goals defined, there's not budget associated with it, then again, this is a maturity model thing that I would do, is then ask the other side of the coin, which is what are the expectations of like your delivery time frames. So if they say, I've had this experience, many of you probably have, they don't have a decent goal, things aren't really well defined, the goal doesn't seem like it's where the team around this doesn't really seem like they're prepared to utilize it. If you ask questions like, well, what are the expectations for this? And they say things like, well, we have this big launch coming up and we want to train our sales team, or we have this big thing that's going to happen, and the time frames are incongruent, right? Where you're like, okay, it's going to take me 6 months to a year to train this organization how to do it. I'm going to invest the majority of my first year into building awareness within this organization about what this function does. And I might just not even get any team associated. Maybe I get that one person that I need to hire, a unicorn, but they have goals that are like 3 months out. Red flag. Right. And so it's like, ignore the title, right? Because the title is what they're saying is you could probably assume in that case that the title is being used as an incentive to bring people like you in, where they're like, we want somebody who's experienced. We want to make them feel good. We know that the director title is such a hurdle for many people to get over. They might be using that as an incentive to get you in the door, but that doesn't change the fact that if the time frames are different between what you're going to have to do versus the expectations of the role, it's like, those are the kinds of situations where I really do feel like it's our responsibility as practitioners, experienced practitioners particularly, to go to those leaders, CEO or thereabouts, and sit them down and say, let me describe for you how to make this successful, right? And I don't consider that like building them a plan. I do think it is worthwhile for us as practitioners, as you develop experience, to make or use, you can steal from Learning Outcomes all you want, use some of these resources to be like, look, to be successful with this position, here's the kinds of things that you're going to need to do and think about over the course of the next 3 months, 6 months, year to build a program like this. This is the kind of budget. Go to the budget calculator on Learning Outcomes. Download the budget. Create a budget. If you want to go into that level of detail.
Yeah.
And say, look, I can help you build this thing if you want me to. But I really suggest it's our opportunity to help them and give them some advice as to like what they're trying to do. Because the worst thing that could happen is you say, look, it's not for me, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to bounce. They hire somebody else and that other person just like walks right into the minefield because maybe they don't see it. Maybe they don't have the experience. They're enamored by the director title. They're enamored by the VP title. They walk right into the thing and blow their leg off. And it's like, that's not going to help bring the practice forward. I do appreciate, and I feel this, I feel the like, we don't want to just do consulting for them for free, but I think any of these opportunities where if we see that incongruence between the goals, timeline, and the expectations that they're having, where those incongruencies exist, it's an opportunity for us to be like, let's, I don't know if you had this, you're in the interview. I feel like it's a classic Brian Childs interview move, right? But
classic Brian Childs.
Classic Brian Childs right here is you're in the interview and you just go like, can we just take a moment for a second and be like, let's just take our hats off of like applicant and hiring manager and just take those off for a second and be like, can we just look at what's like, let's just stop for a second and talk about this role and be like, this is a conversation we're having. This isn't a like, oh, I'm trying to put my best foot forward. It's more like, let's just take a step back and think about what you're trying to accomplish. I think those are really powerful moves that you can make in a job search process. And, if anything, it probably makes you look even more experienced and sophisticated. But I don't know. Long-winded answer. I just say like, be ready to have that conversation. Look for those red flags between like what the expectations that they have versus where they are in their readiness. Use the maturity model from Learning Outcomes. Use the budget calculator from Learning Outcomes. Build those things, those tools. That's what they're there for.
I love that. That spawned a couple other questions. We still have plenty of time here. Here's something that I've been thinking about too. There's that felt experience of what happens if you as let's say you're the hiring manager hiring this director or manager or whatever, right? And you do that and you don't have a plan. In some of the things that I've seen out in the market, and remember, I talk to a lot of people, I see a lot of things, and I've had a pretty solid career in doing this building these kinds of teams. One thing that I've seen now as well is that when you bring the wrong kind of person in, let's say a director, and let's say you bring them in from a field that doesn't understand customer ed, right? And this again is not meant to be pejorative or anything. That let's say you have someone that has is an L&D director, okay, coming from internally facing organization for a company that's not working in software, and put them in a role where they have to deliver in a fast-moving, hyper-growth software environment. How do you think that's going to express? How do you think that's going to work out? A lot of the times what I'm seeing is it's hard because functionally the playbook is off, right? And now a lot of the times, and in one case I saw out there, it got to be so lost, the strategy got so lost that the focus was just on delivery. Just put out content. No, we're going on a time. We're just going to deliver on every 2 weeks. And if you don't do that, then you're in trouble. No, what happened? There is no cognizance of now that's butts and seats, old school, just content development.
Yep.
There's no strategy. There's no plan. There's no intentionality. There's no connection to ROI. There's no awareness of what the actual business needs. And in particular, there's a complete loss of sight of the customer.
Yeah.
Totally. This is a soapbox for me.
I know. I'm just like, keep going, man, preach.
Yeah, no,
I agree with that. Like, it's like, whether that's in marketing or in customer education, I feel like there's this, like, in both of these realms, there's this like eye rolliness that I have around. If all you're measuring is content output, that's the same as being like, you know what, you dug an amazing hole in the ground and it's perfectly, or like you dug a pool in the ground.
Oh, I love this Brianism.
Yeah, you're like, you dug a great pool in the ground, but guess what? You dug it in my neighbor's yard. So it's like, if all you're looking at is output, you're just sort of like, hey, good job. You dug the pool. That's awesome. It needed to be 30 feet that way. And it's the exact same problem where you're like, if all you measure is content production and you don't measure the impact on it, you could have spent, most of that time sharpening your axe rather than swinging it.
Yeah. And, it might be lost on this podcast for sure. But for those of you on this that are dealing with the felt side of it, this might be a good thing to say, is that what happens to the people in those organizations that come to them is important too. So if you have a manager that's not capable of managing people, or not really good at it, and there's been times in my career, if I was totally transparent, that I really didn't feel like I was doing a great job. Maybe thinking that way was important too, right? Because I have that self-awareness. But if you get folks in and you just drive, in startups in particular, your team's gone. And the people that will fill that void will not be the same quality. That's important to know. You're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. The P and PM balance. What is that? Stephen Covey. Performance capability. Yeah, that's it.
So I want to ask a question to the community here who's watching, which is, so after we've gone kind of through a couple of different angles or entry points onto this discussion, is like, so I want to pose the question, is like, does this title inflation, this director thing, matter? Right? And I know that's kind of like, there's a lot of different ways to interpret that, but like, if it is truly, let's just say, for the benefit of the doubt, let's just say that like, it's being done to incentivize people to apply. And let's even say that like the salary is commensurate with a director role. Okay. So let's say like, it isn't just like some director and you're getting paid like peanuts, but like between if it's in software, you have some kind of package that is commensurate with the role of a director, mm-hmm. and there is no budget associated with it. And you look at that and you say, you know what? This is just a IC role, or maybe at best it's a manager role where you're going to get one or two resources over the course of the first year or two. if you go in eyes open to it, doesn't matter. Like if I was to go back, Paley O'Brien, look at like some of the other roles I took where I was dealing with this sort of thing, and I was to say like, I really got bent out of shape because of the misalignment of these expectations. But if I was to go back and be like, yeah, but what if you're just taking the role as a manager? They're just giving you a director title and a director salary. Is that bad? Does it need to have the goals? I don't know. I kind of want to pose that question and be like, because I think that that's kind of the debate that some of us have to have when we're looking at these type of titles. Do you just take the title and do it for a year or two, or just even do it for the sake of doing? Oh, here we go. Okay, good. Somebody's weighing in. It matters because inexperienced people taking director roles with no goals and outcomes defined means a CE program that fails, that hurts the perception of CE as an industry. Okay. I see that. Like I see that as a consideration, right? It's like you might get people that are not directors and they're like, I'm a director, and then they go out and like peddle that director title in other places, and it sort of like dilutes or sets the bar. I think that's a rationale.
So you're kind of equating a title with a stock. I don't know. I look at a title as part of my own personal brand, but part of what I bring to a company.
But I think that's what this comment is saying. Is like, yeah. And Debbie weighs in as well. So Jasana and Debbie. Jasana, for some reason, I'm getting like LinkedIn users on you.
Yeah,
so
that's weird.
I'm assuming that's you in there. But like, I do think that it matters because as a community, it matters. But then there's this like selfish aspect of, not selfish, Dave, but either way, like self-serving aspect, which is like, yeah, it's part of the personal brand. If you get the director title, you can use it as a currency.
You know, that this makes me think about something. Maybe it's just because of who I am and how I've grown up and the exact timing of my career, but something that I feel like I've always been chasing, and I see this even more so in upcoming. You know, the newer people are newer in their careers. Let's put it this way. I feel like I when I was young and I had my first job. And here I was thinking, I was looking at managers. Managers always had an office, right? Physical office in a room. They could put their tchotchkes on and stuff on the wall. And I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be great? I have a cube. I always have a cube. And I'm always in I was in a lab, and then I was in an open floor. And then open floors became more responsible, it feels like in my entire career, I've been chasing this dream of some kind of authority for what I know, right? But it seems like it's gone broad, not like I can say, I'm Dave. Well, I feel like I can now, but it's taken a long time. I say if anything happens, titles matter. They matter to you as an individual, because I want you, if you're listening, to think about this too. If you go for a role that's a stretch, we are trained to do this, and it feels good. But if you go for a role that's a stretch and it is something that you've never done this, like your director, VP, I see VP roles out there. The change from a director to a VP is one of it. It's serious. And maybe those of you who are VPs listening in could tell us this, especially in our field. Now you're at that executive level of function. You better not be doing the work. And you should have a team to do so, right? But I don't want to grab a role and then go to my next job and fail. I don't want to see people get a role and walk into these things not having, being panicked because like, oh my gosh, now I have this escalation and I've never done with that escalation before. Or now I have a hiring problem or an employee personnel issue and I've never dealt with this before. And because now when you're moving so fast as a company and then you're dealing with that, you're going to get PTSD as a leader and burnout too.
Yeah, some good comments in here. I do really appreciate you bringing in the concept of like The Office, because like it cracks me up. 10 years ago,
I have a bat and a printer.
Yeah, it's like the currency though. I think what we're talking about like currencies of authority or something like that, where it's like, man, when I was working at GE, it's like having an office with not just an office, mind you, an office with a door that closes, and an office with a door that closes that doesn't have a window in it where you can fully like go in and nap. It was like Mad Men,
You busted me.
But but that was totally the thing where people would work for 20 years to get to the point where they could have an office. And like COVID happens and everybody goes away, and all of a sudden it's like, well, dang, we've lost a currency of authority. And now it's like, I do really think that some of these
Wow.
titles and what they're doing is that they're using currencies of authority. And I think one of the things that is interesting is it's a misalignment by the sounds of it to some of us, is it's a misalignment where it's like, I think that Dave and I'm sure many of the people that are commenting in here, and I think you're even sharing this in comments, it's like many of us would be like, the currency of authority that I want is confidence in making good decisions and the ability to move the needle with an organization that I have.
Wait.
I
want to
I
inject
want to
another
feel like
word.
that's a currency that I can apply versus it being like, I'm going to dangle non-cube over you. And that's going to be the thing that you're going to be like, I'm going to spend the next 2 years driving away at trying to get that.
There is a term that our CEO, Rob Castaneda, I'll say hi, Rob, if you're listening, brings up this concept of stable confidence. What we need more than anything in this era, I mean, we need it always. One of the things that let me tell you a story right now that is relevant and prescient about what we're experiencing in this kind of pseudo recession, kind of inflation, the world's on fire thing, is that you have people on your teams that are struggling with big, and COVID did this, big, hairy, audacious problems. We all have to work from home. I have a kid sitting here. What stable confidence means is you have a leader that you've hired that has an EQ probably bigger than your IQ and can emotionally connect with all levels of your team to drive business and keep everybody floating, right? And happy. And that's a lot. I mean, I've learned so much in the past 3 years about being a leader that I never would have. And I've had these transparent conversations and thoughts about how we're feeling. And that's important. That stable confidence that you can bring as a leader, that's the individual you're looking for. And again, going back to what we're saying, that the title means something. Mm-hmm. The title is important.
Yeah. Hey, this is a great conversation. I feel like we're almost out of time.
Well, we can go over, but yeah, we should probably wrap it up because it's been a long
week. Thanks for everybody who's like been in the comments. I think this is I just think it's so interesting right now. We're at a very interesting time. I think all of us keep saying this in our own like one-on-one conversations that we have and like happy hours and whatnot about like, we're in this very interesting time where what's different now than I think it was 5, 6, 7 years ago is that there are several of us who feel like, or there's a community of folks that have experience, right? Yeah. And so, whereas before there was a lot of fake it till we make it, and we're just kind of like trying to figure it out.
Oh, you're saying that term again. Okay, great.
No, but like there's a lot of this, like there are experienced practitioners, and I think that these companies want that experience, except one of the challenges is like signal and noise, where it's like, there's so many people that are like, hey, we want this director. And we're going out and being like, yeah, I'm going to apply to these director roles when they come up. And not all of them really know what they're asking for, even though we do have really experienced practitioners that are out there who are ready to take that up and ready to drive growth and drive this, which is why in some of the comments here, we hear like, hey, we need to be careful about how this translates into the community and how it translates the expectations to those companies and what it is. But I think it's a really interesting time on account of us now having a lot of experienced practitioners in this space and the importance of those folks helping educate the market about what it means to be a director or VP of customer education, what those practices are, goals, et cetera.
I love it. All right, well, let's start wrapping up. Hey, thanks everybody in the audience. This was a very well attended for a Friday morning, just jumped on. And what Brian and I we were talking about this, and it wasn't just Brian. Debbie, Sharon, Desanda, we've all been thinking about this kind of stuff for a long time, and we wanted to share openly with our audience. Let me show you a couple links before I escape here today and get off the show. First off, Brian, you represent learningoutcomes.com, learning-outcomes.com. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the things that I want for people to see from you? We work closely together. We have a group of people that are kind of like in this orbit and ecosystem. What are you doing right now with Learning Outcomes that can help people?
Yeah, I mean, think of Learning Outcomes as basically like a strategic resource for practitioners. And so as you'll see within the blogs and events, part of that is about helping people have community experiences like this. Also trying to document some of the common challenges. But then, as you can see here on this screen with the advisory workshops, just like what Service Rocket is doing, very similar. It's like if you need to have a red phone to call and you want to get help, the advisory services can help you do that. There's also more structured interactions where we can do things like assessments, similar to kind of like the outlining that that Service Rocket does, where it's like, let's take a whole of organization approach and consider what is it, helping you identify objectives, helping you figure out what those goals should be, and then also zeroing in on strategic projects. So for example, if you want to do something around like developing a marketing plan or developing your budgets or things like that, if you need help with that, that's what these advisory services are for.
What specifically I was really excited about is I think of you as in this ecosystem with Service Rocket, Customer.Education, and C-Lab. You've had, what is the document you just had up recently? Can you share me the link to the hiring profile?
Oh yeah, if you go to the go to the top left in Learning Outcomes, click on that, and then build a team. If you go to that button down there, this can take you to the org structure guide. So I find this to be really helpful. This is something we've thought about. There's also in the blog, you'll see a couple of articles that are related to, like, there's Christy Hollingshead, her job leveling guide. There's the budget guide to go along with that, as well as a resource in there that has different job titles and links to some of the salaries. So it's like, if you're looking at these titles, you're looking at that sort of stuff, there's some resources for you. And the nice part is, and we've seen this with other folks, is that, feel free to literally like download that thing and screenshot it and throw it within your own presentation that you need to make to your executive sponsor. So it's like the idea here is that you can beg, borrow, and steal from the Learning Outcomes activity, so you can use it for your own needs. That's how we're building it, and I hope that people really do that. Like, steal this book, is kind of like my impression about like what Learning Outcomes should be. And if you need help and you want to set up some kind of relationship where we have a red phone and you need to ask questions about one of these types of topics, you can go to that advisory services tab and just fill out the form there and shoot it over to me.
Yeah. And I also want to do a couple of things. Yeah, that's cool, Brian, that we work a lot together and we collaborate. This is a really great page. You've got some good content on there. Also, I wanted to bring people back to C-Lab. C-Lab, similar, we all work. These are all of kind of like our passion projects where we're really trying to connect and help. And if there are others of you out in the ecosystem right now, Debbie, I know you work a lot with certification folks. Sharon, you've got great resources. Jasonda, you're always out there talking. C-Lab, we're trying to do as well is bring voice to those folks. The latest episode is up, the State of the Customer Education Industry, Part 1. There's 3 parts. They should be coming out in sequence, week over week over week. We've got a whole bunch of really great content there. And that all maps back into, like Brian, you were talking about some of the work that you engage with. At Service Rocket, we do this. We do advisory services. We do training. We do instructional design. Come talk to me. Our page here, again, is in the link. I'm going to link it to the comments here as well. What we are all about here, was Service Rocket kind of helping to spearhead and bring people together, is helping make this a craft, make this an art, make this a science, so that you don't have to stumble over the traps and pitfalls and things that we have. Here at Service Rocket, I want to run workshops, and we have many services that can get you up to speed. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Brian, I want to thank you for just jumping on in an afternoon here or a morning and having some fun talking about some of the things that we do, and definitely talking about how we can help our market and our people. Yeah, let's keep it up. I love this conversation. Thanks for everybody for joining, and feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or go to Learning Outcomes and let's chat. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.